We're coming in hot to give you our hot takes on all the latest mental health news.
From headlines and memes to developments and breakthroughs.
We go into this show blind with the hopes of learning something new.
Before sharing some bunny hugs.
And leaving with our eyes wide open. I'm Nick.
And I'm Todd. And this is Mental Health Headline Hot Takes.
We're glad you're here.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode. Mental Health Headline Hot Takes.
Spin in the wheel to see who goes first. Boop. My choice again. You know, I don't want to go for
No, it's your choice. It's your choice.
I know, but we haven't hit on I have ones on the wheel called Statements of Gratitude, and we've never landed on one. Okay?
Get that gratitude attitude. Oh.
This is another opinion piece. I did one a couple weeks back, and I guess I should just invite them on the show, maybe. Douglas Todd, dramatic drop in men in mental health professions bad for everyone. The opinion is, for some men, not having an option to see a male therapist could very well serve as a big barrier to reaching out for help.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I'm the opposite. Like, I wanted a female because I didn't think a man would. Although that's the guilt. That's the guilt, or the be a man. Be a man.
Right. So you think a woman would be more sensitive?
Yeah, I think I think that was my initial reason for selecting a woman.
Well,
I didn't think I could be vulnerable with a man. Although, as I was saying, my therapist says sometimes I'm not even vulnerable with her. So,
you know what? You need a woman dressed up as a dog to be your therapist. You can
or just use I could just use my dog. He listens to everything I say. Actually, that's not true. He doesn't listen to a lot of things I say. Come, don't eat the trash. You're done in the park. Heel. None of it.
But he doesn't give you any advice or strategies, I suppose. But
true.
So the portion of male psychologists in North America, so Canada and US, has been slashed about 70% to 20% in the last 5 decades. So for whatever reason, when psychology was first in its infancy, it was all men, and it's been slashed by 70% over the last 50 years. Or 70%, yeah. The disappearance of males from psychology, social work, school counseling, and other so-called helping professionals. So it's not just psychology, it's social workers and all types of things. It's not only hurting vulnerable men and boys, but it's also hurting women and girls who love them, who have loved ones that are men. So throughout it's a pretty long article, but it's good. But they have no answers, though. They don't say why. They basically just say, there is this big drop.
So is it a drop in men going into mental health, or is it like drop like men leaving mental health?
Going into.
So I have a theory on that. Maybe I should, the fun part of this show is we don't review each other's articles ahead of time, but also I'm curious because I wonder, there's a big uptick in requirements for mental health professionals. I wonder if that is causing more people to go into counseling in the mental health field, right? There's a high demand. Mm-hmm. There's more people going into it, but I wonder if the ratio is just, or not the ratio. I wonder if it's just skewed because there's more people going into it, which means there's typically been more women. So that would just mean there's more women going into it. And maybe the men, like there's a percentage or something that it's the same number of men going into it. But because there's more people going into it, maybe that's why it's more women, because maybe more women are interested in it. Does that make sense? Right. I felt like I talked that way too complicated.
Yeah, because I was talking about percentages. You're talking about actual numbers.
Yeah.
So maybe every year it's 50,000 men go into it. That hasn't changed. It's just the women have.
Yeah. There's more women going into it. Just
possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. They didn't touch on that, but they did touch that. There has been in the past, like for nursing, for example, there's not a lot of men that were in nursing. So schools actually like came up with like marketing schemes to try and bring in more men. And so they're considering doing something like that for mental health and addiction workers. Because it's addiction workers too. It's like I worked in addictions for a while, and it was like I was the only guy in the. I was like, "What the hell's going on around here?"
Right.
So yeah, they're considering doing something like that, but they're not sure how to exactly go about it. They also reviewed a whole bunch of people that go to see people like psychologists and stuff. 60% of the people said they prefer their sex, and 20% were kind of undecided, or like they didn't really care. Maybe I have that backwards. God damn it.
No, I get,
anyway.
No, I get what you mean. That's interesting.
So the men that do prefer to see a male, they're having a harder and harder time finding them. And as you know, you have to have a good connection with your psychologist. Like sometimes you have to shop around and get the right fit. But if you have fewer to, shop around for, then a lot of people just give up.
Yeah.
Or they're unsatisfied with their counseling.
Well,
so
there's so many things that go into being a counselor too. There's like different theories, there's different approaches, there's different personality styles. Like when you're a therapist, your personality plays into it too. So if it's someone that you wouldn't like in real life, you might not like them as your therapist either, because they bring a piece of themselves into each of these sessions, right? So I think finding one is super important. Like this is one of those I would say, do as I say, not as I do. Because I do think if you're a male or a female or, whoever you are, doesn't matter.
Non-binary.
Yeah. Like it doesn't matter. And your heart is set on one or the other. Maybe give both a try and see. You might be surprised. Like I've had conversations with male therapists on my show, Eyes Wide Open. And I would probably, like, if I didn't know him, like have a connection with him in the first session, just on the level of like empathy, and I think that we're conditioned to think just like men are conditioned not to talk about their mental health. We're equally conditioned to be like, well, how is this guy going to help me with my mental health? You know what I mean? It's right, wrong, or indifferent. Like, I think that was my conditioning. Like, I can't tell a guy how I'm feeling. Are you kidding me?
It's like a hardwired bias that we have already or something.
Yeah. So I think if we stop and ask ourselves why, and then think if that's fair, like, listen, nobody gets in the mental health space to get rich. They get in there because they feel like they want to help people. They have, probably something traumatic that they've been through, or something that shaped them, or something that lit them up to do this. It's not the same as like going to business school, getting a corporate job, or going into a trade or something like that. It is a different profession. So I would just, again, I'm telling people to do this all the time now. Just hold the mirror up to yourself and ask yourself why. Why do I feel I need a male? Why do I feel I need a female? Why do I? And I think it's more important to find someone you connect with, and someone whose view of the world, or at least like approach to counseling, will work with you, because there's so many different theories that you can apply as a counselor. And then I think at the same time, you've got to find someone that specializes or has experience or connects with you in some way, shape, or form of your experience. Like, another one for me was, I really wanted someone who was not like around my age and with a year or two, but like someone that could relate a little bit to. So a little bit older, right? But not someone who's old enough to not understand some of the challenges. So then what did I do? I went on reality TV, and there's no one that understands the fucking challenges of reality TV. But I don't know if we're supposed, do we swear on this show? I don't even remember, but I just dropped the F.
I have been.
Okay.
I'm doing the editing, so I've realized that I have been swearing.
Whatever.
Like, I'm leaving it in.
But yeah, I think that's interesting. And there's like a deep dive, like a double click to go down and better understand why this is happening and what the actual numbers are.
Yeah. And you make a good point. Like, maybe there isn't fewer men. It's just percentages. Maybe there's just more women going into it. Yeah, I'm curious about that. Have you had experience with different kinds of counselors and different ones? Like, I've had probably 6 or 7 different counselors in my lifetime.
Yeah, I'm on my second one, but I had some couples before, couples counselors, and they were all different. All three of them, totally different.
Yeah. And it's funny. I've had a lot of male, and I've had only a couple female actually, and the one was online, like so it was over a camera. But both the female were actually older women, and I don't know. I don't know. I've connected with both men and women. I guess I never went in there with a bias. I went in there so desperate for needing someone to just understand and help me.
Yeah.
And, I ran into one of my counselors, my addiction counselor, who, so yesterday was 7 years ago to the day I left, addiction treatment.
Congratulations.
And yeah, thanks. So it was 7 years ago I left, and I went downtown to get some stuff here in town, and I ran into my counselor. That was my counselor, and it was awesome. And she, like, again, it's like you said, it could be a person that you would never think to normally socialize with in society, but she's like 65 years old. She's about 4 foot nothing. She's like 90% blind. She's really heavy, and I just love her. I love her to bits. She's like one of my favorite people on earth. And her style is old school style, where she would like get in your face and like, you little fucker, listen here. Sometimes I needed that. Other times I did need a male to just be really sensitive with me.
Yeah.
So it's just like you said, just try different people. Even you can see 2 therapists at once. Why not? I don't know.
I mean, there's whole like, can you? No, so it's like an interdisciplinary team, right? You may have one that's working on one thing, and you may have, like, for someone in your predicament, you would have an addictions counselor back then. You might have had like a mental health counselor. You might have had a psychologist, right, for maybe some diagnosis, and you might have a psychiatrist for med prescribing, or you might have trauma, a couples counselor, a PTSD specialist who works with veterans in some cases. Like, so yeah, I think it's possible and totally applicable. I think they need to know and work together for sure. I wouldn't be like therapist shopping like you like, oh, I'm going to see this one on Tuesday, this one on Wednesday. I'm not going to tell them about each other. And then
it's like therapist speed dating.
Yeah. Well, I remember mine, like, because after the show, I would, do a whole bunch of shows and talk to other therapists and stuff like that, and have them on my show as well. My therapist was one time, she was like, I'm not going to say who it was. She was like, well, I wish Dr. Blank would just stay out of my client's business.
Well, that's the predicament that can happen, is you get contradicting advice or strategies or something. Then Well,
there's with the like ACA code of ethics for the American Counselor Association, their code of ethics here. If you work in like with multiple counselors, like the ethical thing to do is you always have to put the client first, and like kind of set your ego and your expertise aside and genuinely assess what the client needs first. So, easier to say than to do necessarily when emotions are high and you're trying to help someone from different angles. But anyway.
Yeah.
So this is exciting. So last week I had Katrina Breeze on my podcast, which
I love Katrina.
Yeah. You sent her my way. And so that episode is the one that dropped last week. Katrina Breeze is an activist who had a very traumatic experience with her mother, who died by suicide after purchasing a firearm and basically shooting herself in a episode all over the course of not a lot of time at all, right? And so
in a public setting too.
Setting. So she was able in her crisis mode to go buy a firearm and conduct this act on herself. And as tragic as that is, and I encourage you to go listen. I think you had her on your show. You could go listen to Bunny Hugs and Mental Health or Eyes Wide Open, last week's episode, to hear more of the story. But she turned this into a movement that is called Donna's Law, which is a voluntary no-sell firearm list to help prevent suicides. So basically, if you're suffering with your mental health, with Donna's Law, you can put yourself on a voluntary list where you cannot buy a firearm to help prevent these reactive situations that can happen so fast. And most suicides, I don't remember the exact number. I should have looked that up, but I apologize. The majority of suicides are actually conducted with guns. And so actually, here's
most gun deaths in the U.S. are actually suicide.
Right. So Georgia, this is my headline. This is in the Hoodline. It's by Mark Washington, published yesterday. Published a couple days ago. Georgia senators proposed Donna's Law, voluntary no-sell firearms list to prevent suicide. And this is in Georgia, so they are now going to debate this bill and whether or not it should be put into law. And this is because over half of suicides in Georgia involve a firearm, and that has a distressingly high fatality rate. Approximately 85% of gun suicide attempts are fatal. So the rate of suicides nationally and in Georgia is on the rise, and with firearms being the method used in over half of these tragic deaths, we don't get many second chances. So I just wanted to highlight, first of all, I wanted to highlight Donna's Law and Katrina's work, but I want to highlight the fact that she is, essentially putting the backpack on and going state by state to get Donna's Laws passed, which I also want to stress the importance of Donna's Law and going state by state is this is a voluntary list. So this is not touching the Second Amendment, although the NRA is a thorn in her side. This is not touching the Second Amendment. It's completely voluntary to try and give people who suffer from, mental illness, take away their ability to buy a gun, and by their own determination, by voluntarily putting themselves on this list. So seeing a state like Georgia,
and it's reversible. Like if you're better and things are fine, you can go off the list. It's not indefinite.
Right. It's not a permanent list. So I think it's great because, I don't have a lot of faith in government in the United States. But to hear her story initially about how this happened, and then to hear she actually has had some luck and she has actually had this passed in a couple of states, to see that this hard work is actually getting brought up in legislation in the state of Georgia, I think is really refreshing. And then to hear that they're going to continue this debate and hopefully get this passed, I think is a huge win and definitely something worth talking about.
It's interesting too how many deaths by suicide are like spontaneous or like what's it called?
I was trying
impulsive.
to find impulsive. I was trying to find the right word to not, because I can't. I said this on my podcast. I'm like, I don't like guns. I don't have guns. I don't want to have guns because there are like. I could see that being an easy out, right? Like if you think about other ways of doing it and the way people try, it's a crapshoot with a lot of those. And you have time to think like, I'm going to pop 100 pills. You're sitting there, you're waiting, then you can get your stomach pumped, right? Or how many hanging attempts. This is such a morbid topic and route I'm taking this down, so I'm going to stop. But okay. I just want to say, I think it's
point taken though.
Yeah, I think the whole point of this is like let's make this the first step. Let's give people who suffer with mental illness the ability to put themselves on a list that stops them from being sold a gun in case they have some kind of manic episode or some kind of episode. I think that's super important for us to support.
Yeah. So here's the thing. As you know, I'm a suicide attempt survivor. I had guns in my house at the time. Here in Canada, though, like they weren't pistols, they weren't handguns, they were like hunting rifles.
Yeah.
And I followed the law, so they did have like locks on them. I had the ammunition had to be stored separately, and there's a lot of regulations. And I honestly think some of those regulations probably helped because when I was impulsive, I was in my kitchen and I grabbed a knife. like to go upstairs, to find my key, to unlock the trigger lock, to then go and find my ammunition, to then, and it's also a long rifle. It's not a pistol. I can just, it probably, there was a lot of things, a lot of barriers in the way to make it impulsive. And then the one, after I came out of the hospital, there was a letter waiting for me at home, and I was told to basically get the guns out of my house. Like I had all my, it's called the PAL. It's like my license to be able to have firearms. Now I don't have firearms because of that. I'm healthy enough now. I could go and, challenge it or whatever, but I just never bothered. So I got rid of the guns, and now I don't have any guns in my house. And it's like, oh, whatever. My life is not worse because I don't have some rifles in my house. Like I can still go hunting. I just borrow a gun from my dad and go with him or whatever, It's, but that's the difference.
Well, they're so readily available in so many states here. I think that's part of the issue too.
Yeah. Like her mom was having a psychotic episode and walked into a gun store and bought a gun and walked out and shot herself with it.
And I made this comparison on the podcast, but like, we're so broken here about guns in this country for so many reasons. And we don't even all have the same like reason that we need to have them. Like it's divided, and then there's divides within the divides. And it's like, it's very segregated, but I do think it's difficult. But like, if you think about like a bartender can say no more drinks. You've had enough. Because if they leave and they've been overpoured and something happens to them and they get in a car accident or they kill someone, that bartender has some liability there. So you would think selling a gun to someone who's in a psychotic episode, and again, I'm not trying to throw anybody in jail but like, I think these are things that like need to be considered when we're doing gun legislation, but we can't get any gun legislation done in this country. So this is why I think Donna's laws is good, because it is helping the people who are mentally ill make a decision to not be impulsive.
It is, like you said, it's voluntary. It's not like your husband can go and say, don't sell a gun to my wife, she's crazy.
Right.
Like that still won't work. It's like, it makes no sense to me why that isn't, it's obvious.
Yeah. I know.
Anyway, whatever.
I know. People in this country and their guns, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Well, thanks, buddy. That was a good one. I love Katrina. She's just a really funny lady anyway.
Yeah,
and she's just a cool chick.
She is, and she posted it on her Instagram story. So I was just like, well, this is great. Just talked to you the other day, and now I'm going to cover this. So
timely again.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thanks. Hope everyone enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you again next week.
Yeah. Peace. If you have any comments or suggestions for topics or articles, let us know. Peace, everybody.
Bye-bye. This has been our Mental Health Headline Hot Takes.
We're so glad you came.
Remember, when you heal yourself,
you heal the world.
Be sure to like this video, leave comments, and suggest articles for future episodes.
Hit subscribe to Eyes Wide Open
and Bunny Hugs and Mental Health.